Welcome to the Parsing Policies, Progress, and Promise on the Road to Sustainability discussion. I'm Kalitha Crawford, Head of Content Strategy at Hertzman Global Intelligence. HGI is an apparel business intelligence platform focused on providing deep insights about the entire fashion supply chain, with a particular focus on shining a light on upstream operations. If you're not already receiving our Insights newsletter, you can sign up by visiting hgi.io. So that's hgi.io. And just a note before we get into the discussion, we are recording today's session, so you'll be able to rewatch or share with any industry colleagues later. Also, if you happen to have a question as we are going through, you can add it to the Q&A. Just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can enter it there. I know our time will go pretty quickly today, but we'll try to get to any questions as they come up. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Rafe Benroff, Sustainability, HSE, and Compliance Senior Manager at Sapphire Mills, a division of Sapphire Group, a Pakistan-based textile processing company, and Jimmy Summers, VP of Environment, Health and Safety, and CSO at Elevate Textiles, which comprises premium fabric and thread companies like Cone Denim and A&E. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, just to kind of table set a little bit, I think we came into 2025 and the conversation around sustainability has felt a bit muted compared to previous years. I think, there was a little bit of disappointment in feeling like maybe the industry is not making the progress we'd hoped for by now. And obviously, the US has, rolled back a lot of environmental protections, made moves to pull back out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Then, of course, obviously the trade war itself led to a lot of costs that people were not expecting and has been a major distraction. And we've had some ongoing criticism of the ways in which the EU is kind of chipping away at some of the legislation there. So overall, things have been a little bit downbeat. But that's not to say that it's all bad news, because obviously there's lots of companies out there that are
Mhm.
very quietly transforming their businesses and reaping those benefits. So I think that the hope is that the legislation like the Waste Framework Directive, CS and ESPR will move, as they move into the application phase, they'll also help to accelerate what's happening in the industry. But, of course, with any legislation, everyone can agree on the end goal and everybody can want to move in that direction, but the execution is what's really challenging. And I think that's where we're kind of finding ourselves today. And that's why we wanted to have this conversation. Rafe, so I'm going to start with you from the perspective of Sapphire Mills. What can you tell us about how your particular business goals and the concerns of your brand partners are kind of dovetailing with what you're seeing in the legislation?
So in 2024, when the legislation was about to be rolled out, at that point of time, we were very optimistic that, this would be a game changer for us because relatively in Pakistan, we are one of the most progressive companies. So we were very optimistic that, now we will be able to get that competitive advantage that we were looking after, and it would serve in our benefit. But what happened is that in 2025, those benefits that we were expecting, actually, they did not reap any fruits for us. I mean, we were expecting that we would get more business. Now the brands would be more inclined towards working with more progressive suppliers that are better in terms of sustainability, social compliances, and all these things. But unfortunately, the what happened was with us was somewhat opposite of what we were expecting. So our sustainability goals that we had set for ourselves for 2027, 2030, we had to really, delay those projects because of the fact that the business that we were expecting, the favors, or you can say the priority through the brands that we were expecting. Let's say I'm a platinum rated supplier for for some brand, or I'm a green rated supplier. So still I haven't been able to see that. Maybe because the legislation did not roll out in that manner, but somewhat, yeah, I would say that it did not come out as what we were expecting. And I've seen that business has gone down rather than going up. So yeah, in my terms, the impact has been quite opposite.
Okay. So you're saying your orders have gone down in comparison to maybe companies that you feel like you are further ahead on ESG than they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're kind of not in the full application phase of this legislation yet. Is that now where you're kind of pinning your hopes that once everyone has to fully comply, that your company will have the edge that you're hoping for?
I mean, we are still optimistic, but uh, we were being showcased in 2024, those things have been rolled back even by brands. I mean, brands were showcasing that we will, place 75% of the business with our good suppliers and the ones that are more aligned with the EU legislation coming out and all these things. So we were always the first ones to go towards it. That you want this, we will go towards this. So we were already working a lot on those things. But some brands, when they faced some lower sales orders through the consumer market and all that, so they really rolled back those orders. They canceled confirmed purchase orders and all these things. So we were very disappointed at the fact that even though we were looking towards this thing, but after the legislation has passed and now it's in the rollout phase, that 2027, 2028, the timelines that we have. So considering how the brands were not held accountable by their sustainability teams, that the sourcing people canceled those orders, but the sustainability people did not have that much importance at the table to influence that decision, that this is one of our good suppliers. So I haven't seen that. I'm still hopeful, but I mean, in the past 1 year, in 2025, the things that we were expecting are quite opposite, honestly
Okay.
speaking.
Okay, and so we're going to dig into that some of those potential reasons later in the discussion. I want to bring Jimmy in, and Jimmy, maybe a lot of this conversation that we're going to have is going to be focused around the EU legislation, just because at a federal level we really are not seeing the traction from the U.S. Um, and given what's happening in the US where environmental protections are right now, what impact do you think that that's having on our industry? Is it sending a signal that maybe is not a positive one? And then also ultimately, when the EU legislation really does get rolled out in a few years, is it going to matter? Because the international companies are going to have to comply with those EU legislations.
Yeah. Yeah. So, first of all, just to kind of level set, Elevate Textiles is a US based company, but we have operations throughout the world. So, while our headquarters is here in the US, most of our production is elsewhere in Asia and Central America and elsewhere. So, so from our standpoint, and I get asked this question a lot, that so if the U.S. policy is this, I guess you guys are going to not do that. And my response is always, I mean, we're a global company, and our commitments are not based on, the regulatory situation in the U.S. And the EU for that standpoint. I mean, it is based on our I guess core values and our approaches, and so. I mean, we do have commitments that we're still fully aligned behind, and the regulatory winds and the political winds are going to blow different directions, and this is a time for leadership. Is did we mean what we said when we made these commitments? Now, that being said, the reality is, there is an impact, of the change in commitments and the tariffs and those things, which makes it more difficult, I guess, for us to execute, our plans and so and kind of what Rafe was saying, we're like we don't the pathway for us to reach our goals now is different, and timelines might be different. We have seen some maybe pullbacks and or I think we're all in this state where we don't know what's going to happen. The uncertainty is paralyzing us from a business standpoint, but also then from tied to that are the sustainability commitment. So, but overall, I think I just see I think the winds are going to blow one way or another. That's going to happen. But I think overall, what we see is the direction is still correct. Directionally things are correct. It just may not go as fast. It may shift, the areas where we invest, and so that that has very practical and real impacts, but the direction is still I think the same. One thing I did want to mention though, that Rafe hit on is what I think the changes in regulatory stances by different countries and delays and other things I think are showing us is that, or what my take on it is that we there always has to be a business case, for any improvements and any movement on the sustainability front, just like any other initiative. There has to be an underlying business case, or else, we're at risk that whenever the regulatory push falls out, then everything falls apart. So we can't put too much weight on regulations being the reason to do things. There has to be a business case. And for example, what Rafe just mentioned about the sourcing and the sustainability groups not being together, or there being silos, and I mean that happens all throughout the supply chain, including with my company. That we have to that's an area that we need to continue to work on, because we find out when we have those disconnects, when we have sourcing issues and challenges, then the sustainability commitments tend to, they're not linked. And so I think that's what maybe this is exposing, that we still as an industry have some fundamental disconnects. There are some companies that are doing a great job in this area, but this has been a lot of the discussion that we've been having is, that how do we link these two in a way that so that sourcing groups and sustainability groups aren't disconnected, that they have mutual KPIs, and so we have a better chance of the business case always being considered, because at the end of the day, there's got to be a business case. And as we start to look at deeper decarbonization and other things, that's part of the problem why we're not making, it's not part, it's probably the main issue of why we're not making progress, is because the business case isn't there. It costs money for deep decarbonization, but we tend to all want it for free, or we don't want to spend a whole lot. And so we're stuck. And we can't, I guess my overall point is we can't count too much on regulation making up for the lack of a business case, because I think it has a risk of falling apart.
Right. And then Rafe, sorry, my voice is kind of going in and out. Rafe, from your perspective, how is your company looking at the various approaches from the EU to the US? And is the goal for your company to kind of target the most stringent of these regulations across the board, no matter what, kind of market you're servicing?
Yeah, exactly. So, like for example, in my company, I work with more than 50 different brands which are working in US, Europe, Latin America, all parts of the world. So for me, being a sustainability head at my company, I it's a better approach for me to follow the most stringent requirement, but at the same time, the most stringent requirement is from, let's say, a customer that does not have that much business with me. So to follow the most strict requirement would require more investment. But when we talk to that brand that, why don't you increase your stakes with us? Why don't you increase the business? Because the things that you are requiring require more, a very heavy investment. But when we talk about that, then that does not come out. That at least we say that, give us consistent business, co-fund this project with us. It will be a good marketing for you as well, that you are working on sustainability. It will be better for your supply chain, for your scope 3 emissions, but that long-term commitment is still not there. So hence the fact that if I follow the most stringent requirement, is yes a better approach for me, but is that really a feasible way in terms of a business case? I don't really think so. So at times, we are in a very difficult situation that when we pitch to our, owners of the company or the board of the company, that, we want to target this, that, no coal, 75% water recycling, 80% water recycling. So they're like, who is asking for this? And when we say the name of that customer or that brand, and they say that, we only have 5% business with them. So why should I invest so much money just for 5% of the business? So it does not correlate internally as well. So if some brand is requiring very heavy requirements from a supplier, then they should also have more stake in that company as well. Because if they're just going to shop around, then it doesn't make sense for, a supplier. So yeah, I mean, that's the situation, if I even want to do that.
Yeah. And so from this perspective of shopping around, what are the tangible benefits that you can foresee for your company, Rafe, once everyone is on this quote unquote level playing field that we are hoping that the policies will usher in?
Yeah, so if the brands stop shopping around and they see that this legislation coming out, they will be held accountable going forward, that they cannot have low graded suppliers that are not that much committed towards sustainability as a progressive supplier. So then they have to be responsible, they have to take responsibility and, phase out those suppliers from their supply chain which are not on that level as what they are requiring, or what they are requiring as a brand, or what the legislation is requiring. Only then can I have that level playing field. But until and unless this comes out in true letter and spirit, uh, this shopping around thing and the sourcing people getting their own way, and sustainability taking a back seat, this is bound to happen till 2027. So yeah, this is the current scenario nowadays.
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about how many different policies there are. Even just within the EU, there are obviously, the EPR legislation in California, and there's different kind of local legislation in the US as well to be aware of. How are you both going about educating your internal teams, but then also your suppliers? Maybe Jimmy, you can start us off.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, and I'm sure all the folks that are in this space, know how mind-numbing it is, like how many different requirements there are, and the proposed legislations, and some of them that are coming into effect, and just it's uh, I mean, it's really impossible to, to be up to speed on everything. And then you have, as Rafe said, when you have many, many different customers, each customer has their own twist and their own approach. So, so the way that we keep up with, especially on the legislation, we have to depend on um, uh, these organizations that we're a part of, trade organizations, like in the U.S., American Apparel and Footwear Association, the same types of organizations around the world that have groups that their job and one of the services they provide for membership is that they track all this legislation and digest it and crunch it, and then basically make it uh, make it possible for us to stay on top of, at least have a chance to stay on top of, what's going on, and like in the US, all the different states that have different approaches and those type of things, and then the same thing in the EU. But even with that, even with those organizations, it's still very difficult. But that's how we do it. We try to, and we use that's what we count on from our memberships in those organizations. And then also some of the other multi-stakeholder organizations that we're a part of, we count on them to, help us to stay abreast of, because they have a vested interest to stay abreast of all the regulations too. So multiple sources, including some of our customers do a really good job sometimes of having webinars and other things, especially when they're starting to share it with their supply chain and us. So we do that and then cascade it, here internally. Now with our suppliers, we actually, that's something we don't do as good a job of. It's like we eventually then cascade it down to our suppliers, but we also expect them to be keeping track of the regulations for their own purposes too.
Right. And Rafe, in your experience, is that what's happening with the suppliers? Are they up to date on what's happening? Do they understand when you're coming to them, maybe with different compliance and reporting needs from the brands?
Um, so in Pakistan, this is a much more difficult task compared to, I mean, a developed country. So in Pakistan, because we source from our upstream suppliers, like let's say I give you an example of a garment. So I have a zipper supplier, I have a thread supplier, I have a fabric supplier. So as we go upstream in the supply chain, uh, the level of education, the level of literacy decreases. So in the upstream suppliers, they don't have dedicated sustainability people. So this is the current situation. Now, what I have to do as a responsible, uh, this comes under extended producer responsibility as well. Now I have to educate them. So what I've done is that, like the brands are now looking to phase out some of their suppliers that are not good enough for them, I'm trying to do the same thing as well. So what I'm trying to do is that the top 80% of my suppliers, I'm first targeting them. I'm educating them on what the legislation is, legislation is coming out, how they will be part of that, how I will be held accountable if they don't do their job properly. So I have to educate my internal colleagues first, like my sourcing people, my supply chain people, that we have to know what is going to happen in 2027. We need to educate our suppliers, so everyone, because now sustainability cannot be done by a single department or a single set of people. Everyone in their own domain has to take responsibility. So whether it be the salespeople, whether it be the human resource, anyone, so they have to look into that, and that's what I'm doing. So I have people dedicated on this task, which is a program we have a supplier engagement program in which we target our suppliers that are good enough. So we are either going to be placing more business with them, or we are giving them that signal that by end of this year we won't be able to give you business unless you get up to this point. So like getting registered on Hig Index, having certain social certifications, so that anything cannot be reported in the supply chain. Because yeah, so it's a very difficult journey, honestly speaking, getting the data from them, engaging with them. Actually, you have to teach them what is sustainability. So it's a very long journey, honestly speaking. But yeah, we are trying to, uh, be that beacon of hope for them as well in the long term. But it is quite difficult, honestly speaking. So, but yeah, we are trying to, do that.
And what ultimately happens with your operations if, you said you're kind of targeting your 80%, if a large portion of them or a meaningful portion of them are not able to come up to the level that you need?
So eventually, like I said, like we have about 2 3 years right now. So they are gearing up. I'm not saying that they're not. They are giving commitments to us that we will be working on this, because obviously it's about business. So by hook or by crook, you have to get it done. So we are pressurizing them, like we get the requirements from our brand, so we have to, transfer that pressure onto them as well. So they are, uh, you know coming on to the table with us. We are having discussions with them, we are training them. And honestly speaking, like we just mentioned, that it has to make business sense. So we also visit their facilities. The things that we are doing, we offer them some services, like, for example, they're not that energy efficient. We offer them that, we can send our expert team to your factory. You don't have that level of expertise, we can facilitate you in that. So this is how it runs, because that's what our some of our brands are doing as well. They are supporting us in being better, or you can say increase our efficiency. So we are transferring that knowledge upstream so that they can be geared up as well. So I mean, it's something that is a responsibility of everyone in the supply chain, but that's how, they are ready to accept the change. At least that's number one, the first point of commitment. They are committed to doing it consistently. They are able to do it or not, let's see. That would be a test of time, I would say. But yeah, the commitment is there at least.
Hmm. And as you said, you're looking ahead to 2027, 2028. And as you're doing so, are there any specific aspects of any of the policies that you consider to be open questions still that you need clarification on? Even before we start talking about how the brands might interpret it, just, as the policy is written now.
So currently, CS triple D, that one is the most, I would say, very overarching. That due diligence, I mean, till what level of due diligence will that cover? I mean, let's say if my tier 4 supplier has something reported, so will I be held accountable? Would that impact me? I mean, there are some aspects still that are a bit confusing, and for that, I mean, we might need more clarity on the legislation. That, I mean, let's say if something happens at the farm level, and in case, like for example, the Xinjiang cotton case, if I source cotton from that, and if something is reported on that farm, and in some way it is reported that, Sapphire had purchased something from that particular farm or that particular spinning mill, so how much will I be held accountable? How much would that impact me or my customers? I mean, that still needs to be. I think I need more clarity on that. To what extent will I be held accountable if something like that happens? Because
Mhm.
there needs to be some fine line that, where, I mean, how much responsibility can I alone afford? So that's something that, more clarity is required on.
Okay. And one of the things with legislation always is the potential for unintended consequences. I've been around long enough to see different impacts on this industry going back to there was maybe 15 years ago with the Children's Product Safety Commission. There was legislation that came down and it just completely upended the industry for a while because clearly it was written by people didn't understand the timelines and all that was involved in creating apparel, right? So, Jimmy, as we're looking at the legislation and looking forward to the positives that it could bring, what are you concerned about in terms of unintended consequences?
Yeah, my biggest concern is over the data requirements and verification, validation, and it seems overall like the trend is a little bit of data is great, a lot of data is wonderful and even better, and the more granular the data, the better it is. We want all the data, but that that comes at a cost, and that's very problematic. From just a cost standpoint, there's an optimum amount of data that will convey or allow the required and needed data points of the different pieces of legislation to be met, but then not go beyond that. And I think the tendency is for it to always go beyond that, and for it, like you said, to be written by people who don't really know the industry. They might think they know it, but they don't. And too often, things get written, especially when you don't talk to the suppliers. When they have maybe consultants and others at the table, maybe a few brand representatives, but they don't have folks from mills that actually can provide, okay, that you're requiring this data that's going to require every facility, just as an example, to install meters all over the mill, and it's going to cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's already, that's so those are the type of things I worry about. Unintended consequences are that something's going to get hardwired into the legislation that is a mismatch, and recreate something or create something totally new when we already have systems or and ways of measuring in place, such as HIG and also ZDHC on wastewater and other things that are established, and they're not perfect, but they're we're all have coalesced around that more or less. Um, and then to have, but my fear is that the EU legislation will come in and do something totally different, and then we have to, and then we're gonna sit here and struggle for years to try to fit square pegs into round holes, and all of it is just it, a waste of time. It's a waste of resources when we're spending time, creating data that we already have, but it's not exactly the same as what's been hardwired in the regulation. And then that's what I fear is the unintended consequences of not having all voices at the table, and also recreating the wheel when we already have good systems in our industry, that we just need to solidify and use. I think too often, perfect ends up being the enemy of good, and that ends up just wasting so much resources and takes it away from actually making impact.
Right. And Rafe, you and I have spoken about the idea of data fatigue. So I feel that maybe you're very much on the same page as Jimmy, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, last time we talked about data fatigue. It has gotten worse now that every now, uh, every new day you get a new requirement. Every brand, because now everyone is getting onto that sustainability bandwagon. Everyone wants data, but everyone wants data in a different way. So right now, last time we talked about a year ago, so I had like two different platforms on which I had to report environmental data. Now I have four at this point of time, and still there are discussions going on for more. So I'm always like, please harmonize the data, because even in Europe, one customer is sitting in Spain, one customer sitting in, let's say, Denmark. Both of them have different platforms, have different requirements. Someone wants on, let's say, Resource Advisor by Schneider Electric. Someone wants it on Hig Index. Someone wants it on RTIS. So we're like, why are you just requiring the same data again and again? Because now what they have to say that we have 200 different suppliers, we have 300 different suppliers, we are more accustomed to this platform. Maybe that one was pitched better to them in a different manner. So it's increasing day by day. First it was just social compliance, then it moved on to chemical management, environmental compliance, now traceability. So different platforms, same amount of data, but going on. So it's not reducing. And because now all the brands now need that data, and there are new and new different service providers coming out every day, and everyone has a different solution and saying that we're the best, and eventually for us suppliers, it's just another new thing.
Yeah. I
So
would just like to
yeah.
add to that, if I could, Kalitha, that just add a point. I think bottom line, what we all have to realize is that data is not free. It costs money to generate data. And so we have to get away from this notion that, oh, data is free. No, it costs money. And the more we ask for and the more granular, the more it costs. In fact, it really goes up, and increases a lot, especially if you have to buy meters and all that. So and duplication of effort costs money. It is such a waste when we're generating the same data, but have four different platforms, five different platforms, and where somebody has to put data, the platforms don't talk to each other. So I think we have to insist as an industry and have just continually be saying this, all of us, data is not free. There is an optimum amount of data. We don't want to have all the data. A little bit is good, a lot is wonderful. No, there's an optimum amount. It needs to be the data that needs to be shared is the minimum that does the job and no more because it costs money. And then we've got to have systems that talk to each other and so that what the North Star for all of us needs to be, we should only be putting data into something once and then it gets shared. And because anything more than that is just a tremendous waste of resources.
I think I know the answer to this question, but are either of you ever involved in those discussions with your brands? If the brand is saying, we are thinking about, we need a platform to help us monitor X or Y. Is that a conversation that they have with you ahead of time? Do you get to have any voice in, because you have experience across platforms, you could probably help them vet, their needs. Is that something that happens?
It does happen. I mean, they do ask us, but again, what happens is that, let's say I'm a service provider, I am a data platform, I'm able to sell you my platform in a better manner. So, you being the sustainability head at a brand, you would like my platform because I just sold it better. And the brand, the people that we're talking with actually are not the decision makers. We are just talking with the people that are, let's say, on the second or third tier. The decisions are made on the top without thinking the actual ground reality or not. They don't even take data from us because that conversation is only good if they ask us before implementing that platform. So they just come out, they say that, we working on this platform has this benefit, and let's all the suppliers, like 200, 300 suppliers, all get onto this. So yes, we get a voice, but it is not having much of an impact at the moment. But yeah, I mean, on every platform, I was in the textile exchange conference, this was my same point, that please harmonize the data. It's no use to have so many platforms, so many data sets, and eventually the data is same, but everyone is looking at it from a different perspective. So yeah.
Now, I'll just add, yeah, we have been asked, what platforms we're using, and there has been some of that. But I'll say on the positive side, something that I've seen start to happen recently is some brands who are engaging with suppliers in like building their or consulting, I guess, on their sustainability program overall and their approaches to maybe a particular area. But they're I think realizing that we need to be co-creating this and we need to be talking. And the old model I think was brands decide and mills do. But now I think we're realizing, okay, that might have gotten us where we are now, but it's not going to get us to where we need to go. This is going to have to be something that we co-create so that we don't have the waste of resources. We don't, have these issues where, we can share these facts that, how destructive of time it is, to have multiple platforms that don't talk to each other. So I'm seeing some really positive things here just this year where brands are starting to engage and co-create with suppliers. So that's good.
Okay, looks like we lost Rafe for a second here. Hopefully he'll be back. Um, but just moving forward, Jimmy, I know that for Elevate, recycled content is a major focus. And so what aspects of the legislation are you most hopeful for in that regard?
Yeah. And we're a tier two producer, meaning, we manufacture threads and fabrics, and then we supply it to cut and sew operations. We don't have any tier ones of our own, but so yeah, we do have significant recycled content targets in our sustainability goals and targets. And but we're completely dependent on pull through from our customers on that. We can't, in most cases, almost every case, sustainable materials content is it's not at par. It costs more, and so we can't stay in business and just produce a lot of recycled content or textile to textile recycled content products and then go see, hey, does somebody want to buy this? It has to be pull through. That's the only thing that makes sense. So that being said, we're completely dependent on pull through on that. But our hopes for the legislation and what the EU does in particular is through like eco-modulation or other aspects to basically catalyze the movement, especially into textile to textile, T to T. To have like, especially for maybe even public procurement where company or countries have provisions where they require T to T content and orders that them as a country are placing for uniforms, for other things where they're actually placing orders, and some other types of mechanisms, but to basically catalyze and get that type of thing going. So with the vision of it being that once that there's whole parts of especially the T to T supply chain that don't exist. They're being stood up, and they're only going to get stood up through I think it has to be catalyzed and it has to get going, and then it can stand on its own feet. So I'm hopeful that some of the legislation will have an impact in catalyzing that, not for it to be forever, but for it to be something to get it going so that these missing pieces of the supply chain can get up and become self-sustaining businesses, and can then catalyze the whole process. But because we're totally dependent on pull through and so to meet our goals.
Yeah, that could be one of the biggest kind of unlocks from the legislation if we're able to get the whole recycled infrastructure in place where it isn't currently. I just wanted to take a step back and talk about data for a second. Rafe, are you able to kind of quantify for us? You talked about that you've gone from two different platforms to four different platforms just in maybe the year or so since we've spoken to each other. What does that mean in terms of headcount for your company?
So I'll give you an example. I think I've talked about this before. In 2018, we were only 6 people in the entire sustainability compliance safety department. Now we're about 40 people. And day by day, uh, my resources are burning out. I mean, they're saying that, sir, when we joined the company, we only had to work on 5 platforms. Right now, we're working on 9 different platforms. The workload is increasing day by day. And at that point of time, I'm like, maybe I should hire more resources. I mean, I only have one option: either hire more resources or push back on the brands that, why are you doing this? That day by day, workload is increasing the same amount of data because it increases the cost of manufacturing.
Mhm.
The cost of manufacturing is going up. Now, data is required even on a product level. Previously, it was just that, just give me the data of how much water you use on an annual basis. But now they're asking for product level data. For product level data, I need to have more sophisticated equipment. I need to have more people, expert people that can handle that equipment, then handle that data, and then translate it into something that can be showcased. So, in terms of headcount, I mean, just on this spectrum, I would say 5, 6 times the headcount has increased. Some
Mhm.
are direct people, some are indirect people. because when you install more equipment, obviously you need more people to actually handle that equipment.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's multiplying day by day.
So we've talked a lot about the resources that are necessary to even just comply beyond, not even speaking about anything that you might be doing beyond the basics of what you're asked to do. So, the question of the day is how are buyers and suppliers working together? What type of support are the brands lending to your businesses to be able to ramp up, to be able to educate in the ways that you have outlined for us today? Rafael, do you want to kick this off?
So not all brands are working in this manner, but there are some good brands as well that really do have, been with us in this entire journey. So there's one brand, what they do is that they have mutual KPIs. So it's a very good practice that they have, and really quote this on a lot of forums, that the supply chain people in the brand that are actually responsible to source from different suppliers, they themselves have sustainability KPIs. So they are incentivized, the supply chain people of that brand are incentivized if they source more from sustainable suppliers that have lower carbon footprint, lower water footprint, better social ratings. So it's part of their monthly KPI, and on a monthly basis, they are being monitored that your supplier in from where you sourced 70% of your business is, let's say, B rated on social compliance, has used only this much amount of coal and this much amount of biomass. So the CO2 emission of that person is visible to them, and it's calculating their incentives as well. So this is one very good example on how they've used sustainability data to take care of the sourcing decisions. Now, what happens on a higher level is that they can see what is their carbon footprint of Pakistan, what is their carbon footprint of, let's say, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and accordingly, uh, that country is also incentivized by getting more business. So, for example, if Pakistan is lower on their carbon footprint and better on their social ratings, the next year comes, Pakistan will have a higher rating to get business in that region. So that's how, I mean, that's a very good example of how sustainability is closely linked with sourcing. So that's, and they are co-funding the activities as well. They have dedicated people that are supporting us. So that's one very prime example of, and consistent business. That's one more good thing, that they have been working with us for 9 years, and there hasn't been an year in which they have not been in the top five for us. Sometimes they're in the, let's say, number one, number two, number three. That's their rating, but they have been consistent with us. So there are some brands in Europe that are working on that manner, and some are like, shopping around all the time just because of price. So yeah.
So there are some models where there's actual tangible support happening. Jimmy, are you seeing that as well, or what's the most common way that you're working with your brands?
Yeah. I think, yeah, the most common thing that I see that is a good example is that where our brand customers have certain minimum requirements for sustainability performance, and so for us to even be at the table and our competitors to be at the table, they have to meet a certain um, minimum sustainability performance and or just a commitment that, to be engaged and to be, doing things like HIG and the social compliance audits and those type of things, and being, sharing that data openly. Um, and it's very helpful, and it really helps us from the business standpoint when that is it's across the board. And so, and we know that, all right, they're not going to require that of certain number of suppliers, but then if they need price, they're going to go get some low cost from somebody else, from a competitor that's not doing these things. So that's very helpful. That's very good when that's done in that way. And I think, and Rafe said it too, that, I made the point about the business case. And the one of the most important business cases that can be made is commitment that, that a brand is going to, be with us, and that we're on a journey, and that, and we're not going to be the cheapest because we're going for deep decarbonization, and that costs money. And so, they're what by, giving us us not being the cheapest, but what they're investing in is decarbonization. So they're getting credit for reductions in their scope 3 emissions. That's what they're paying for. And but for that to be understood, that's part of the model. That is what's going to drive deep decarbonization. And I think that's what I see the evolution that is happening and that needs to happen from, moving away from just like minimum requirements to this engagement that, okay, I really think something even more formal. I say this sometimes off the cuff, but like, for deep decarbonization, we have to make investments and commitments that are many times 5 to 10 years. And if you think of like a purchase power agreement, sometimes longer than that. And we're being asked to make those commitments. But some customers that just go PO to PO, their commitment to me, to us, is like the current PO. And if my prices get out of line, that, what we worry about is that they'll say, hey, great job on decarbonization, but you're too expensive now. We're going to have to go over here. So I think part of the business case is brands and us together, like coming up with relationship models that give us the confidence, because that's worth something. It's worth something for us to know that, okay, if we progress down this decarbonization pathway, this roadmap together, and it's not free, and we need to stop pretending that it's not free, because as long as we pretend it's not free, we're not going to make progress. It's not free. They're paying for something. They're paying for decarbonization, but as long as we're on this road together, we're with you within certain guardrails. We can't, go too far off out into the ditch, but that is worth something. That helps make the business case. There's economic, value there. So I think that's what we have to look at going forward in that relationship between the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, so those commitments matter. And then, just as the last question here, obviously this year we've been grappling with the tariff situation, which I can only imagine helped undermine potentially some of these relationships, right? One of your brands that has been with you and had intended to be with you now has higher costs and has these other things that they have to take into consideration. So I think it's really difficult to do exactly what you said, to have commitments when we're in this volatile environment. And it seems like we're always going to be in a volatile environment of some sort or other. So how do you think that the tariff uncertainty and the tariff situation will continue to impact your business? And are you at a point now where you can feel confident in those commitments and feel confident in making the investments that you had set out to at the beginning of the year? Jamie, I'll start with
Well,
you.
okay.
Yeah.
I have to go first on that. No, I think I would say we're not confident because, that's the kind of the um, issue with the tariff situation this year has been just the not knowing and the back and forth and I mean, you can't make long-term plans when things are volatile, and I mean, that's business. There's always going to be things like that, but this has been particularly very problematic for all of us because and we we can't know, or we don't know for sure what's going to happen, and our customers and we have just been reacting as best we can. I mean, we have to, and we understand that, but yeah, I don't. I think we're just, one thing, what we have done is tried to stay very close to our customers and be have scenarios and plans in place to, if this happens, this is how we're going to pivot and then to work the sustainability strategy into that also.
Okay. And Rafe, what about you? How are the tariff impacts maybe continuing for your business?
So the tariffs have really have hit us on the US market side. So because we are 50-50 Europe and US, so European market was not that much disturbed, but the US market really got disturbed. A lot of business orders were pulled out, and still we have not been able to get long-term forecasts. This has been an issue post-COVID that we have not been able to get a lot of forecasts, but because of the tariffs, it has increased even more. So, like let's say I only have visibility for hardly 2 to 3 weeks now. So brands are not giving me long-term commitments. They're just, asking me if you have this particular fabric available with you. If I have that available with me at that point of time, and I can service them as quick as possible, then only I'm being considered. But because of the tariffs, long-term commitments have almost died out, and there were some instances with us in which we even had to give discounts on the already placed orders because of the tariff uncertainties and all that. So it was very disturbing for the salespeople in serving the US market and to provide them the services. So the impacts have reduced now, but still the word uncertainty is still quite, still there.
Yeah. Well, Rafe and Jimmy, I appreciate you coming on and having this discussion with us. I'm sure we'll have many more as we're heading into 2027 and really kind of the application of a lot of these policies that we talked about today. But I think it's important for us to continue to kind of surface what's happening beyond tier one and what the realities are of trying to comply and report in the ways that are mandated these days. So thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for everyone who joined us. And again, if you're not already on the HGI newsletter, you can go to hgi.io and sign up there. Thank you.